Alright, welcome back to the K4 channel. My name is Chad, and today we have a bit of a change of scenery as we're talking about one of my favorite analogies when it comes to building your retirement income. So let's get into it. So when I think about building your retirement income, I like to think about it like building a house. You start with a foundation, just like this. You build a structure from there, and then you finish on the inside. And no, I didn't make this entire foundation. I'm not building a shop just for this video. That would be ridiculous. This is for my wife's business, but I figured it was too good of an opportunity for me not to go through my favorite analogy. So, what are foundational income sources? Foundational income sources have two requirements. Number one, they are not linked to the market, and number two, they're reliable. Every Canadian has some form of two of these, CPP and OAS. They're not market linked, they're even indexed to the inflation. They're reliable, they're here to stay. Everyone has some access to that in some form. Some of you may also have access to GIS. Maybe you can manipulate CPP a little bit to get more access to GIS, but that's available to some of you. And to a select few, there's also defined benefit pensions. These are really the only four different income sources that I would consider foundational. And for me, foundational income sources is where we start. When we start building your retirement income, I like to start with things that are reliable. They're maybe boring like this foundation, but there's something that we can build on for your future. Now, a couple weeks ago, we posted a video where I made part of my argument why I believe delaying CPP is, in most cases, you're going to be your best option for retirement. And one thing I did not go into that video, and I will here, is it's all about the foundation. Moving on your assets a little earlier in your 60s and using them for a more robust foundation in your 70s and 80s, I believe is a logical and rational trade. And that's one of the reasons, in addition to my previous video, that I believe waiting on CPP is a really good idea. My favorite financial plans when I'm looking at it with people is when we delay CPP and maybe there's a little pension involved or something like that, and all of a sudden the foundational income source is covering off 90% or more of their spending in their 70s and 80s. That is a fantastic spot to be in. And that's where the compounding effect of delaying CPP really takes its shine. Because yes, in those years, you'll be taking less from your investments, but that compounds. If you have $20,000 more income between a couple of CPP in your 70s than you would if you took your CPP at 60 or 65, that's $20,000 less that you have to take out of your investments per year. And if it's an RSP, that probably takes $25,000 to $28,000 to get access to $20,000 because of taxation. And if that delays until the time that you pass away in your 90s, that can compound and grow into a pretty significant number. That is how compounding small decisions, small tweaks can really make an impact on your financial plan. One of the other things I think about when it comes to building your retirement income, again, and when it comes back to this foundation, is when I have people come to me and they say, well, I want to retire early. And to me, retiring early is any time before 65, and of course there's varying degrees of early, right? Retiring at 64 versus 65 is not as significant of an impact as delaying retiring at 55 compared to 65. But for those that do come to me and say, I'm looking to retire at around 55, right away I know a couple of things, right? I know that when it comes to foundational income sources for their retirement plan, at 55, they have no access to CPP. They have no access to OAS. If they were to qualify for GIS, there's no access to that either. So right away, my foundation is looking weak right off the start. So is there a pension? And I'm not saying it's impossible to retire at 55 without a defined benefit pension, but I would say the math is very, very difficult to make work because having something to build on, I think, is critically important. That's why I poured this. We're not going to frame the structure right on the grass here. That would make no sense. That building would not stand up to any sort of weather or anything like that. So when I have people coming to me and say, I'm looking to retire at 55, I'm like, whoa, that is 10 years less compound interest on your investments compared to 65. That's 10 more years you need to be invested for and prepared for, because those first 10 years are getting added. Not only are they being added, they're the most expensive 10 years. And if you don't have any foundation to build on, if you retire and all of a sudden the market takes a downturn and you're relying 100% on market-linked income sources, that is a very scary situation to be in. So that's why I'm all about foundational income sources as much as I possibly can. So what are we talking about when it comes to foundational income sources when I'm with my clients? Really, it's coming down to timing and options. So when it comes to CPP and OAS, it's when are we taking them? And that's usually a relationship between how much assets you have, how early you're retiring, longevity, things like that. But really, we're talking about when to take CPP, when to take OAS. When it comes to pensions, if there's a defined benefit pension, often we're reviewing the different options that you have. Often there's 3 or 4 options to a pension. I recently came across one that had 12 options, which quite frankly I found ridiculous. But these are the conversations I'm having when it's coming to foundational income sources with my clients. All right, that brings us to structural income. Now, in most cases, structural income is actually the smallest of the 3 income sources when it comes to your retirement plan. And the reason why that is because this is the one that's usually the most restricted. And by my definition, a structural income source is an income source that is linked to a market and has some form of restriction. So a LIF maximum, a RIF minimum, or in some cases, rental income if you own rental property. Now, all of those are linked to a market, whether it be the real estate rental market or the stock market, and have some form of restrictions. As if you can go to a renter and say, you know what, this month, would you mind paying me 18 months rent because I want to go on vacation? That's not usually possible. Same goes for RIF minimums or LIF maximums. You cannot go back and change those. And so for the most part, once we have our clients, and we've been doing this for a couple of years, the conversation around structural income is, this is your RIF minimum, this is your LIF maximum. But when we're talking to new clients for the first time, one of the very, very first things I look for right away is, do you have a LIRA or a LIF? LIRAs convert into LIFs. And what is the jurisdiction of that LIRA or LIF? And it's really important to know the jurisdiction of the LIRA or LIF because it dictates how we can operate with that. And this is a conversation that's deeper than the purposes of this video, and I'll do a separate one on that where I'll actually go through province by province rule and with some of the rules that they have to make decisions on, stuff like that. But for the purposes of this video, I look at LIFs as a restricted income source. So LIFs have maximum withdrawals, and anytime that I have the word maximum thrown in, I know a couple of things. First, I want to get as much out of there as I possibly can. You don't want to get into a scenario where all you have left is LIF money and you've already hit your maximum, because then you have no flexibility and no access to capital. So right away I'm looking, what is the jurisdiction? So what is the province, or is it federal, of this LIF or LIRA, and can we split it? Because if we can split it, then half, or in Saskatchewan's case 100%, can go into a RIF with a minimum but no maximum, whereas the other half then stays in the LIF that has a maximum, which is a nuisance. Let's call a spade. A LIF maximum is a nuisance. So these are really the conversations that revolve around structural income. So then with my clients, what I do at the beginning of the year, we figure out 3 things before moving on to the last step of building your retirement income house. The 3 things are, how much do you want to spend? What is your foundational income? And what is your structural income? By the time we figured out those 3, we can figure out, is there a shortfall, or are we actually already in a surplus position, which would be great, but is very, very rare. But what is the shortfall from spending minus structural and foundational income sources? And that's what then leads us to finishing income. Finishing income is essentially any other income. We've established the foundation. We've figured out what the structure is. What else do we need? How short are you on your spending goals after knowing how much your foundation and structure will be? Most of you will not achieve your spending goals from just the foundation and structure together. That's the whole point of having investments. RSPs, TFSAs, things like that are meant for finishing income. But every year it may change. That's why I call it finishing income. Just like finishing the shop, I can choose to paint walls if I want to. I can take a wall down or change a window or change a door, whatever it is. We can change finishing income year to year. So with my clients, my process is the beginning of the year, we figure out how much they want to spend. We figure out foundational income. We figure out structural income. We figure out how short we are. How much more do we need? Then we go and look at the environment that we live in. What are tax rates doing right now? What's the market doing? And these factor into where I should be taking my finishing income from. A great example is if you're at the very, very top of a tax bracket and you don't want to push to a next tax bracket, maybe in that year, TFSA makes more sense for finishing income. However, in other years, maybe you're at the bottom of a relatively low tax bracket once those things are factored in. So maybe it makes more sense to take from the RSP. So that's really what finishing income. So my conversations in this department are really, how short are we? What environment do we live in? What's the most efficient way for you to get your money? And that is the final step of me building your retirement income house. So in my opinion, it makes sense to know which of these three stages your income is coming from to make sure that your finishing income is as efficient as it possibly can be. If it's time for you to review your financial income house, feel free to reach out. It might be time for your K4 financial plan. Until next time, keep planning.